Welcome to Cycling Fashion Week, the podcast about looking stylish on the bike. I'm your host, Anthony, and joining me are my co-hosts, Warren and Alex. Each week, we'll look at the latest bike kit and gear releases.
Hey guys, so this is a new podcast. It's the only global podcast that looks at cycling purely from the point of view of looking cool and looking good. So this podcast, and this is Alex speaking, by the way. This podcast will be, I'm not sure if it'll be weekly or if it'll be bi-weekly. We'll probably play it by ear, but we'll be looking at everything. We'll look at gear, tech, kits, and everything. But we will only ever comment on how things look. Even the new tech releases, we don't care how well it's functioning. All that we care about is how good or how awful does it look. So that's really the angle of this podcast. And I just want to reiterate, we're the only global podcast doing that.
Alex is the business mind on this podcast, if that isn't obvious.
That's our unique value proposition that we bring to the table. We look at how things look in cycling. That is what we do.
And that's what matters. We're too old to care about going fast anymore. Yes. And cycling is an Instagram still image, short video play now. And so if you can look good in that still image and your bike is 35 pounds, nobody knows how heavy that bike is. But if it looks like garbage and it's the fastest bike out there, who cares?
And to be honest, no one cares how you rank on Strava KOMs when you're in your mid 30s. And for this reason, I stopped paying for Strava Premium because I wasn't doing good at all in those Strava KOMs, but I look amazing on my bike and I have a sick bike. So that's what I do now.
There should be a Strava KOM for how good you look.
Well, there's the local legend.
There's
there's the local legend feature, right? But I'm not sure what it would be for, the coolest looking cyclist in the area. That could potentially be something on Strava that I would have a shot at.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like whenever I go on a hard ride and I get a PR and I'm like, oh, sweet PR. Like, okay, I didn't get a trophy, but where am I at? And then I look at it and it's like 240 out of, 900 people or something. And you're like, all right, like I'm nowhere close to this stuff. I can't do it. But when I take that final look in the mirror or like the window of my apartment before I leave and I'm like, everything's crisp, I'm ready for a good ride, and I know I'm basically better than everybody else on the bike.
You still put yourself in the top 25%, though, of Strava participants there. 240 out of like 900.
Okay, sorry, I'm not doing the math. I'm just saying it's never high. It's never high enough to care.
I still think that qualifies as mid pack, but okay, that's fine. However, that's okay. Like I don't mind finishing 240 out of 900. However, I don't necessarily want to pay $75 a year to know that. That's where Strava falls short for me.
I mean, maybe Strava could be us. Somebody needs to invent an app that essentially like you take you take a photo of you and your kid and your bike and it scans it and then gives you sort of a global ranking of what level of style you're at. Now, I do think that's difficult because everyone is wearing the exact same Pat or Mal kit with the same matte black Specialized tarmac. So there'd be a lot of redundancy. But maybe uniqueness will take a hit too. We'll be able, if you're unique, you get an extra point for it.
Absolutely. And so this is our first podcast in the series. And as I mentioned at the outset, it'll be purely focused on looks. This podcast will have several segments, correct? We will generally organize things by segments in order to structure the conversation here.
Yeah, so we'll break it down. We've got sort of right now we got 3 segments. I'm sure we'll add some more, but we have kind of what's in the news. And again, like Alex said, we're going to talk about tech, but only how it looks. We're not going to care about how it works or if it's, what's fancy about it. How does it look? How will you look on the bike? So we've got a few kind of news items each week, and then we're going to have what we call the Panache Police. Name's a work in progress. We'll see. But where essentially we sort of bring up topics, things we don't like, things we do like, kind of, hot takes on cycling fashion and cycling style.
Our takes are hot. There are no lukewarm takes on this podcast.
No, they're going to be the hottest takes that can exist. And then
probably would have been a better name. Just hot takes.
Just hot takes. I feel like a lot of people use that. And then finally, we have a segment called Into the Canal. We'll explain a little bit more, but if anybody's been to Montreal or from Montreal, they know about the Lachine Canal, and that's where ugly cycling things go to die. We'll talk about it when we get to that segment.
And we'll also talk about pro racing, because we're all followers of pro racing, whether it be Grand Tours or classics or whatever. We'll talk about that, but again, only from the point of view of looks. We don't really care, how well Julian Alaphilippe is doing on a particular classic, but we'll talk about his style on the bike. We'll talk about what he was wearing. We'll talk about special kit releases, the Richard Mille watches that the guys are wearing. That's what we'll talk about.
Yeah, like we don't care much the Richard Mille watches weigh. Are they going to look good enough for them on the bike? Does it go with their kit? Which edition do they have? Is it something that's special and custom? It's all about style.
Yep. All right, so why don't we go into our first segment, boys?
So welcome to the new segment. This is where we look at the latest kit and judge it, basically. So Adidas recently released its first gravel shoe that I'm aware of. Maybe back when they used to do stuff in the 70s and the 80s, they had one, but I assume not. So I'm going to open the floor up first to Alex and Warren and say what you think about it. Let's make the takes hot.
I mean, they probably didn't have gravel shoes in the 80s because gravel cycling didn't exist in the 80s, as we all know. There was no bikes for it, so therefore it didn't exist. These shoes, they remind me of those Costin Nike SB shoes from a few years ago. If you remember those, they also had the sock.
Oh,
the
yeah.
built-in sock, so that's exactly where my mind went. And I remember that skaters hated it and Costin got ripped for it. I don't know. I like socks to be socks.
But so Giro's already done this shoe, right? Like I forget what model it is, but Giro's done kind of a sock booty shoe, and I don't mind the look of it. I haven't tried it, so I don't know how it feels. But this is kind of a weird thing about cycling, and I don't understand, because in one way, a lot of cyclists want everything to be niche, but then when these big brands get in and essentially do nothing new or interesting, it goes buck wild, right? The minute Adidas releases something, like if Nike ever jumps back in, if Lance gets back on the bike and re-wins his 7 tours, like Nike gets in, people go crazy for all the Nike stuff. But it's like there are cycling specific brands that are either doing the same stuff these big brands do or doing better stuff, but for some reason we seem to love, or cyclists and the cycling sort of Instagram world seems to love when a big brand does stuff. I mean, you even see it with these like Velo kicks where they paint Specialized to look like Nikes. Why?
Yeah, I think because cyclists are niche people by definition. Less and less, though, I have to say, with the pandemic and more people joining the sport, I think cycling's become a little bit less niche. But I think probably what that is cyclists wanting the validation of a big brand, essentially validating what they do on their free time. Now, with respect to this release specifically, I think it's absolutely awful. There's a few things there that I absolutely hate. And I just want to say I'm not opposed to Adidas getting into the cycling game. When I think Adidas cycling game, I think Jan Ullrich climbing the Galibier with 35 RPM, giant thighs against Lance Armstrong, early 2000s, the good days of doping in cycling. And I really enjoyed that. And I associate Adidas with that. So I'm not opposed to Adidas getting into the cycling game. Now, there's three things that I think are awful with this. The number one, the sock, the integrated sock. I mean, are you kidding me? Why do I need integrated socks in the shoes? I have expensive socks that I wear, that I have bought with my own money. I want to use them. I want to wear them. And the other thing is the sock there isn't even the right height. I mean, that's like basically an ankle sock, and that's awful. I want socks to be a little bit higher than that. So that's wrong. The second thing is I have an issue with the idea of gravel specific gear. I know maybe Warren, you might have a different take on this, but for me, because I know you've owned like the bibs that have pockets and stuff like that, and you're into that. I'm really not.
No good. Cargo bibs will be in the canal soon.
When brands market gravel specific apparel to cyclists, and I say that as a dad, right? So that should appeal to me as a gravel dad myself. But I just think that's terrible. I want to look pro at all times. I want to wear road kit when I'm riding gravel. I just don't think there's a need for gravel kit in general, and I just think that product is not needed. And the third thing I'm going to cover real quick, I just think it looks terrible. I mean, the color scheme there is just terrible.
The colorway is boring. It's basic. It's been done before. But I think again, like what you're saying, like it's like I mean, there's been some practicality to it, but I've really disliked this trend of people, even looking great and then putting the bar bag on, right? The gravel kind of look of the bar bag, like just taking away from so many clean looks of bikes with this.
You talking about
the
that canyon gravel bike, right?
No, I'm talking about just people riding whatever bikes, like, beautiful bikes. It could be a Super 6, it could be an old Klein. And the bar bag trend has which I think probably started in gravel, right? Because you go for these gravel rides and you're trying to carry more stuff and everything like that. And it's just in general, I'm with you on this kind of disdain for the gravel look.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know. It's too Colorado, I guess, right? We're sort of trying to be fake Euro trash, and that's just too Colorado for us.
It is, yeah. It is sort of Colorado dad who drinks IPAs. That's kind of the vibe that gravel is going with. And I don't know. I think you can ride gravel while still looking Euro pro, basically.
Now, not to veer too far off the subject, but did you see the new Adidas road shoes that came out a few months ago before these gravel shoes?
I didn't.
What are your thoughts on that?
No, I didn't see them. So you'll have to educate
give us
me.
a breakdown, Warren.
Well, they were just basically black Adidas shoes with 3 white stripes, and just I think they were lace ups.
Which is out anyways, which is to go back 5 years if you're going to put lace ups on. We're done with that. We're a double boa only.
Well, there you go. I guess that's the answer.
They're not terrible. I mean, I guess if you're into Adidas as a brand, which I'm not personally, but again, I could get on board based on that Jan Ulrich look from the early 2000s, but I don't know. I just don't see the need for Adidas.
Laces are bogus. I'm with Tony. They're just
yes, that's terrible.
They're not
you want a
practical.
boa.
They're like for lazy cyclists.
Yes, boa looks better. Double boa is even better. If you have single boa, I don't see the point. It has to be a double boa in 2021.
Exactly. I also want to say that if I'm gonna buy a cycling shoe from sort of like a Euro soccer brand, I want Kappa or nothing else. Like if Kappa comes out with a Kappa cycling shoe and a Kappa kit, I'm all in. Like I'm as Eastern European as I can be, just rocking Kappa, the stripes down the side. Like I don't need, if I'm going Euro trash, I don't need Adidas.
I could get into Fila as well, getting into the cycling game. It's got a good like Italian 1990s vibe that I enjoy.
All right. I mean, so we go from big mainstream brand to big cycling brand, and we're going to talk about maybe one of the worst things they've done in recent memory is Rapha's NBA collabo with the San Antonio Spurs. Now, I don't even know how to describe how bad this kid is, considering Rapha. I just want to jump back quickly. I've been into cycling for decade plus now, and I have a lot of respect for Rapha because early on when I got into cycling, they were really the only brand that I knew of that was trying to bring a little bit of simplicity and minimalism and style to cycling. My first kit was a Française des Jeux jersey because it was just buying pro kit jerseys or shop jerseys was the only thing available. And then Rapha came out and they kind of gave you this option where you could get this kind of nice, simple kit. So I still got a lot of respect for them. But what they've sort of started to do recently, we can talk about the fail of their quality and stuff. But from a design perspective, this San Antonio Spurs kit looks like something I should be buying on AliExpress.
It looks like Walmart kit. Like, when you go to Walmart and you can buy like a t-shirt for pretty much any sports team, like not even basketball specific. Like you just go to Walmart and it's like, oh, there's a Spurs shirt, there's a Lakers shirt. Or maybe I'm thinking when Zellers growing up.
No, Walmart does the same thing. Yeah, they always have like the worst versions of like, I don't know how the licensings work for these sports things, but it's always like you go in and it's the worst Toronto Maple Leafs or Montreal Habs shirt that seems like a reject or something.
When I saw that photo of the jersey, that's actually like, I didn't think it was Rapha. I thought it was like, something like a custom brand like Heavy Pedal or something, which no disrespect to them, but it just seemed like a gimmick jersey that somebody made for their like local coffee cycling club. It didn't Didn't look serious.
Yeah, like I think there was a Toronto shop, I'm forgetting the name, that did like a Blue Jays jersey or something. And it's like a local Toronto shop. It was like not that nice, but it was probably like a small run. And they were just thinking, oh, we're going to kind of like, everyone's trying to, rep their hood. And so we're going to do this. But like for a major brand, and also, I mean, I don't know, the crossover of our listeners with sports, but like the San Antonio Spurs, it's not the Lakers, it's not the Knicks, it's not even the Golden State Warriors, the San Antonio Spurs, like,
Well, so what's the story behind this collab? I haven't followed too much, but yeah, why the Spurs with Rapha?
It's a great question. Given that this is a fashion cycling podcast, all that really matters is clearly no designers were involved in planning it.
no, they just I think there's two of them, and one of them they both sort of just slapped on the logo. One they used the worst logo, which is their sort of the gray and the basic sort of San Antonio Spurs, and the other one they use, I think it's their kind of '80s logo where they've got the sort of their colorway. I'm forgetting the colors that they're using.
It's like silver.
Yeah, well, it's like silver, and then they've got this kind of red and stuff. Like the logo is kind of neat. I think sometimes they do their hardwood in that, but it's just there was no thought process. Like I don't know why Rapha needed to be involved with that. The Spurs could have gone to Spexel or some like Asian manufacturer.
It's like if you go onto a sports team's website and you go into their merchandise section, it's the kind of jersey you would see there that like the team is selling, not like an actual cycling brand. Like I'm a big baseball fan, and if you go on the Toronto Blue Jays website, you can buy like, I don't know what they're called, but like golf club covers, which I'm sure in golf, there's probably some like nice version of that, but you can just buy a shitty one from the Blue Jays website. And that's what the Spurs jersey looks to me, is like, it looks like you would go on there and be like, oh, I could buy this cycling jersey for my husband.
And what's actually ironic with this kit as well, and I think, Tony, you hit the nail on the head earlier when you said this looks like something I would have had made custom with whatever brand makes these shirts custom. What's funny with this is that about 2 weeks ago, we're recording this in late August 2021, by the way, but 2 weeks ago, so around mid-August, Rapha just quietly announced that they were ending the custom kit program. So on the one hand, you're ending the custom kit program, but you're releasing these kits that are in a way like nothing if not custom. I mean, a San Antonio Spurs kit is extremely niche, if anything else. So that's a terrible release. I think we agree. There's a consensus here.
So I think we'll switch gears here. I think we've all agreed that the Rapha kit's bad. We've probably got a lot of Rapha to talk over this series because they haven't been doing great lately, in our opinion. But I'm going to move on to something that just dropped a couple days ago: the new Cannondales, Evo CX and Evo SE. So they're taking the Cannondale Super 6 Evo line and they're making it a more aggressive cyclocross bike and gravel bike. Now they already have the kind of Topstone gravel that is kind of average looking, not too exciting, but this one's supposed to be more sort of racy. I think Alex has a good take, so we're going to start with him there.
Yeah, so generally, I have a lot of respect for Cannondale. As far as bike brands, I think they are very good. They don't try to reinvent the wheel. Although the Topstone, that's the one with the weird fork, right? Is that correct, Tony?
Yeah, they have a version of it at the lefty, but they also just have a standard sort of
The
aluminum
basic
regular
one.
version.
It
Okay,
also
so
has the kingpin suspension in the back, which is like a little.
So I'll ignore those design novelties for a second, but generally speaking, if I look at the road line from Cannondale, it's generally very clean design, very classic design. Again, they don't try to reinvent anything. The geometry of those bikes is pretty classic. It looks like things that you've seen in the pro peloton for several years, if not decades. But yet Cannondale keeps making them relevant to the period that we live in. Could be the paint job, could be slight tweaks to the geometry. So in general, I'm very favorably disposed towards Cannondale as a brand, even though I don't own one myself. Now, this release, this bike, I think it's true to Cannondale's design philosophy and its heritage and what it does. And I think it's a pretty good looking cross or gravel bike, if you will. The only thing that really annoys me, and that's not Cannondale specific, you could argue, and it's not specific to this release either, but it's really sort of pervasive in bikes nowadays, and that really annoys me. It's dropped seat stays. Um, are there brands that make bikes with non-dropped seat stays these days? And I don't really care about the performance element of dropped seat stays. Like I said, we don't do performance here on this podcast. I just think it looks bad. I think a bike looks way cleaner when the seat stays aren't dropped.
From purely an aesthetic perspective, the drop seat stays are one of the worst things that has happened to bikes. I don't know anything about the stats, the wind tunnel testing. I don't know what it's doing, but it looks terrible. I've actually got a Candale. I've got the Candale Cat X, and I made sure to get the 2020, and because I knew the year after that they'd start to drop the seat stays on them, because that was the way the other Candales and all the other bikes were going. And I thought, I can't be riding around with drop seat stays. It's just a terrible look. It breaks up the kind of cleanness of the bike, the sort of double triangle. It's a weird thing. And who gives a shit about the performance if it looks that bad?
Yeah, there's a symmetry, there's a symmetry element that gets broken when you drop the seat stays. Like the back doesn't look like the front. There's no harmony. I just think it looks terrible, but it's a trend. I mean, it's been, at least, I'm going to say at least like 5 or 6 years that all bikes from the major brands have had drop seat stays. And again, I don't know why they're doing this from a performance standpoint. I'm sure there's a reason. It just looks terrible.
I just want to jump in quick. I think the giant TCR might still have avoided the drop seat stays. I haven't checked their newer models, but I know recently they've kind of kept with the more classic geometry.
Yeah, they have. The stays are still looking proper.
The top tube is pretty sloped though, and that's unfortunate.
Well, yeah. I mean, you need the levelness of the top tube is something I don't think people consider correctly. And I mean, it goes back to just everything about the kind of gravel world, right? And I mean, I know some other road bikes, but that endurance style, that gravel world, where they're just taking this beautiful machine and they're building it for comfort, which again, back to our style, we don't care about performance, but we also don't care about comfort.
And we also don't care about ending up with chronic back issues from riding, a bike that has a slammed stem and an unsloped top tube. We don't care about that as long as it looks cool.
Oh, exactly. Welcome to our next segment that I guess we're calling the Panache Police. We'll work sort of through it, but it's kind of thoughts, opinion, rants, things we see in the cycling industry, negative, positive. I think so far with this podcast, we've been a bit negative about stuff because that's always a little more fun, let's be honest. But here we're going to talk about something positive, an underrated brand that we all love that doesn't get it. I wouldn't say I see out on, enough on the group rides, enough on the Instagram posts. The Italian brand La Passion. For me, they tick all the boxes. They're simple, they're elegant, price is great. You're not sort of, breaking the bank just to buy a pair of bibs. I think we all have the bibs in there. Not that we really care about quality, but they're some of the most comfortable ones we have. And I just think that, I don't know, I guess marketing just matters too much. I don't know why we're not seeing La Passion out on the group rides.
I think because their marketing isn't that great, but their product's incredible. Like my favorite pair of bib shorts by far, but follow them on Instagram and there's a lot of things I would change, but the photos of people in their kit on their Instagram look great. It's just the rest of their marketing is not so great.
The style is sort of right on, right? Like, and it's not sort of overdone. It's typically pretty simple and clean. They kind of go with colors. They still stay sort of on trend, following what kind of colors are happening, but they don't go with too much. I know, Alex, you do have an issue with one part of their design, but you're a non-native English speaker.
I do, but I don't want this to be the focus. I do, but I don't want this to be the focus of this segment because I've only had negative takes so far, and I'm a fairly positive person, so I want to sound positive here. I love the brand, La Passione, consistently great quality, good price point. I find their fit is really good as well. One thing I absolutely hate in cycling is jersey sleeves that are too short. I personally like my sleeve to go almost to my elbow. La Passione does that consistently, so it's a very good
But is
fit.
that just
And
because
like
you have really small biceps?
yeah, but that's cool, right? You know, big biceps are extremely lame in the cycling world. So I no, small biceps are good. That's the look we're going for. But just back to the brand though, again, like you guys said it, it's fairly minimalistic design, solid color jerseys, things that are generally simple that'll look great in 10 years, that looked great 10 years ago. So as long as the product holds up, you're getting great value for money. So we like that brand. We support it and we own a lot of it. Now, the one thing that ticks me with that brand, and Warren, you touched on it. You said their marketing isn't great. There's a lot of things you do differently on their Instagram. So this brand is from Italy. They're from northern Italy. I think they're near Lake Garda or in that area. And I don't know if you guys have been to Italy recently, but the country is just in love with the English language in general. Like Italians want to do everything in English. Uh, like even the Italian government, they're calling several of their programs, their social programs that they have with English names, which is ridiculous considering that a huge amount of their population doesn't speak English. But the country has definitely gone in that direction, and so has that brand. And they put kind of stupid slogans on their gear. Like one of them is "worth the effort." So you're buying a really good piece of kit, but in some jerseys, they're going to have "worth the effort" written on the left shoulder, which is kind of lame. And it really shows that they're, non-native English speakers trying to speak English. And it's a little bit bad. But other than that, the minimalistic stuff I love, I think is great overall.
I mean, I do think they're clearly a little with the worth the effort is trying to copy Panormal, but it seems like it's trying to borrow from that like mechanism or solitude lines and how they have those words. That's kind of my impression of it, but at least worth the effort isn't PNS.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Like I know Panorama right now is just like the hottest stuff in cycling, and you can't go to a coffee shop after a ride without seeing 70% of people wearing it. But my childish brain just fills in the other letters when I see that PNS on the back
Every time.
Every time. I can't avoid it. I probably should grow up, but I just can't. It's just not for me.
But we should save our Panormal talk for other episodes, because I think we'll probably devote a lot of podcast time to that brand.
That's true. That's true. But I just want to say one more thing with La Passione, because it's Italian. Everyone will get to learn about us. We're big Italy fans here.
Yes.
There'll be things that are made in Italy that kind of have that style from Italy. We're really positive. We even like sort of diaspora Italian stuff. If you're an Italian making a bike in Canada, we'll buy it. So we love sort of all things Italy.
And they do play up to that they do accentuate that heritage a little bit when they, in their marketing, which again isn't great, but they do mention that it's made in Italy, that it's designed in Italy. So they really play up their Italian heritage, which is why I think it's unfortunate that they're putting up these English language slogans on it. They could have put something in Italian, which would have looked great from a North American perspective.
I mean, even with the, I know we're taking our hot takes of Panormal, but even with sort of Panormal, you sort of see it. They're I believe Danish, and it's kind of like Europe is sort of the epicenter of cycling and that cycling style, and so why drive into that a little bit? Like, you guys make great product, great kit. Everyone loves sort of Italy. Let's drive into to the European nature of your brand.
And why do you try to sound like a Colorado IPA drinker?
Well, and I was just gonna say, like, I think worth the effort sounds dumb, but like Tony was saying, if it said worth the effort in Italian, I don't speak Italian, and I'd be like, yeah, that's
It
cool.
sounds good. It sounds amazing. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But overall,
So
great brand that we like. The Panache Police. If we see you somewhere on the road wearing La Passione kit, then the Panache Police salutes you. Okay, so moving on to the next segment, which is called Into the Canal. Now, we introduced that segment a little bit at the beginning of the show, but just in in a nutshell, why is it called Into the Canal? Well, that's because this segment will be generally about things we don't like, so things that we think should not exist in the cycling world. And the canal that we are referring to here is Montreal's Lachine Canal, which is where these products should end up. So basically, if it's a terrible product, if it's a terrible bike, you need to throw it into the Lachine Canal. So it goes into the canal, and hence the name of the segment. I think, Tony, you have something that you'd like to throw into the canal here.
So mine's not necessarily a specific item. It's kind of like a general style action that's happened recently. We all know with the pandemic that cycling absolutely exploded, right? Just huge, and people were buying bikes like crazy. And so some people went out, they bought their expensive bikes, and then they bought some penis kit, and it just, for better or worse, they actually look pretty good. But I've been riding around, and I've noticed some people on what I would consider extremely expensive bikes, $5,000 plus. You got your Pinarello Dogmas, etc., and they are wearing Nike Dry Fit shorts, a t-shirt. They've got flat pedals and sneakers on. And that whole look, the whole thing is going into the canal. The shop that sold it to them is going into the canal for not, when they bought the bike, not pushing clipless pedals, shoes, kit on them. They're going into the canal for deciding to ride around like that and not getting on the internet and learning what they should be looking like when they're on an expensive road bike. The bike's in the canal, because there's no point on riding a bike that expensive and looking that crap. So all of it, everything about these people, everything about these bikes, the kit, the shops, the whole thing, they're all in the canal. I don't want to ever see it again.
And in the same vein, if you bought an expensive bike during the pandemic, which is a good thing, by the way, expensive bikes are good. We are very pro expensive bikes on this podcast. But if you
Correct.
bought an expensive bike during the pandemic, but the shop left the dork disc on the back wheel of your bike, and you're still riding it that way, both you and the shop are going into the canal. Okay, Warren, you have something that you'd like to throw into the canal as well.
I do. It'll be quick, and it kind of relates to the Spurs jerseys. I just want to throw jerseys you wear kind of like ironically into the canal. Like, an example is I was in a town called Warren, Vermont a couple years ago, and they had a cycling jersey in a corner store that I went to somewhere for sale. I was pretty new to cycling, and I was like, well, maybe I'll buy that jersey and wear it kind of as a joke because that's my name, and wear this horribly ugly jersey. But no, I think ironically wearing ugly jerseys, that idea, that's in the canal. Irony is going in the canal.
Irony and style don't go together. It's not possible to sort of have the beauty of something and sort of make it a joke. You just can't. Like, if you're gonna look nice, if you're gonna look just the right way on a bike, you can't be doing a bit while you're on the bike. So I mean, that's in the canal. That's great.
Yeah, I've seen this one guy in Toronto wearing a jersey with Elmo on it. No.
Okay, so that's a very clear one, like an Elmo jersey. Okay, that's very obviously going into the canal. Now, I have something that's a little more nuanced or on the fence that I'd like to hear you about as to whether it should go into the canal. Let's say that someone is riding a beautiful Colnago from the early 2000s, with like one of these crazy paint jobs with crazy colors splattered all over it, and the kit that they're wearing is something like a Mapei kit from the early 2000s, right? You could say, well, pro kit, like you shouldn't really wear a pro kit because it's not really cool to wear a pro kit. But in this case, it's quite appropriate to the bike that they're riding and to the overall aesthetic that they're going for, even though there's an element of irony to it. Would you send that person into the canal as well?
No, I'm keeping them. They can keep riding it. It's kind of a respect to heritage, which is always a respect to style. It's an appropriate. It's a holistic view of your style on the bike. right? It's you're wearing the kit. Something like Mapei is an iconic kit, anyways, and you're wearing the kit that's sort of going with your bike. You're sort of holistically looking at the style. Would I wear it? Probably not, but I'm keeping it. They can keep riding on. They can keep riding for me.
It's fine to wear something that respects history.
Fair enough. Okay, so you can wear your U.S. Postal kit if you're riding a Trek from that era as well.
The U.S. Postal kit should be ridden with everybody on every bike. I mean, Lance is the GOAT. He's the greatest cyclist of all time. And it's just, if everybody just rode around in a U.S. Postal kit, especially that kind of more baggy club fit one, I'm okay with it.
It just works.
Okay, so I have one brand that I'd like to throw into the canal, and unfortunately, you guys stole my thunder a little bit at the beginning of the show when we talked about that Rapha San Antonio Spurs collab there. So I'm gonna throw Rapha into the canal, and I feel bad about doing that because, like you, Tony, I have a pretty deep respect for Rapha. I've been into cycling for gosh, almost 2 decades now. And they are really the ones that brought style into cycling. I mean, before Rapha, you would just go to any shop, you'd pick up kind of a lame kit that they were selling there. It wasn't really done with aesthetics in mind. And Rapha really, sort of came up around the early 2010s, I guess. And they brought back a certain vintage aesthetic to cycling, a certain minimalism as well. Those kind of solid color jerseys with the armband were very simple yet very beautiful. They brought certain fabrics back into the game. They brought merino back, which is a great fabric if you're riding in a fairly cold place like us in Canada. So I generally have liked the brand and I've owned a lot of Rapha over the years. However, I find that they have strayed from their identity, which was an identity of bringing back the heritage of cycling, the vintage aesthetic, the minimalism, and they've really strayed from that. And they've done some dumb things like this San Antonio Spurs collab and a variety of other designs as well. And generally speaking, and I know we don't talk about quality too much on this podcast. We're mostly focused on style, but I've had a lot of issues with kits just absolutely falling apart with respect to Rapha. Yeah, bibs just kind of coming undone, jerseys having faulty seams, and it's just been pretty generally disappointing overall. I have to say their customer service is consistently great. They always make it up to you. They give you a store credit. They apologize profusely. They get back to you quickly. So I have to respect them for that. But the general direction in which the brand has gone, I'm very sorry, but I have to throw Rapha into the canal. And I don't know if this is caused or correlated with the sale of Rapha to heirs of the Walton family that owns Walmart. I'm not sure if it's tied to this in any way, if they've taken some independence away from the management of the brand. I have no idea, but generally speaking, as a customer, I've seen the brand go in that direction. I think they deserve to be thrown into the canal at this point.
I think the fact that they make mountain bike kit alone is reason to now throw them in the canal.
Yeah, I agree. If they were sort of a beacon of hope for road cycling style when they came out, and that's kind of what we thought their focus was. And we'll probably say it a lot, but mountain biking style is just the worst part of cycling. Like it's awful. They've got none of it. The bikes are ugly. Their kit's ugly. So now that Rapha is spending any design time and energy and concern on making a mountain bike kit, Warren's right. Maybe that's canal alone, but there are a lot of other reasons too.
With respect to this segment, you can come out of the canal over time. If we throw you into the canal, it doesn't mean that you have to stay there forever. You can redeem yourself and come out of the canal at some point. And I really hope that Rapha does eventually come out of the canal.
I was just going to add that I say that about mountain bike kit as somebody who owns a bar bag. I maybe shouldn't admit that on the cycling podcast, but mountain bike kit, no, canal.
Okay, great. So moving on to the last segment of the show, we actually won't do the segment on this show because it's our first show and we don't have material for it. But I do want to introduce the segment in order to generate future material for it. So the segment is called "We Rate Your Bike for Free," and essentially what this is one of our faithful listeners should email us a photo of their bike. hopefully more than one photo, that would be even better. You email us a pic or several pics of your bike at cyclingfashionweek@gmail.com, and we will rate it for free on the show. So we'll analyze how your bike looks, the different design elements of it. We will even comment on the tech, how the tech looks on your bike, and we'll rate it for free on the show. And I say for free because I am the business mind of this podcast, and I want to make sure that this podcast is not in the money-making business. So everything we do is for free here. So we will rate your bike for free. We are looking forward to receiving pics of your bike. So again, cycling.
That's it for this week. Join us again next time as we talk the latest in cycling fashion.